Hello everybody, welcome back to Two-Dimensional Design. I'd like to talk to you about varnish, acrylic varnish. First of all, I'd like to give you a little brief history. Know that varnish really became prominent in the 1970s, but it was really tough to work with. It would actually, you would put it on, it would turn your piece white and slowly move from opaque to transparency. But sometimes it never happened and it ruined your piece. So a lot of people like me that have a history with varnish know that it can be disastrous if not used properly. Of course, over the years, all those bugs in the varnish have been worked out by Liquitex. But the fact of the matter is, I'm always a little leery of it. So I follow these steps to make sure that I'm always successful with my varnish. First of all, I don't trust other varnishes. That's unfortunate on my part, but the fact of the matter is I have a history of Liquitex, so I can guarantee the outcome of your action with Liquitex. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the stroke we're going to use to put on your varnish. But make sure your surface is clean. Make sure your brush is clean. We'll talk about how many coats in just a minute. Make sure your brush is damp but not wet. In other words, you do not want water interacting with this varnish. Okay, but you do want a damp brush. You don't want to be doing this with a completely dry brush. Don't stop till you're finished. When you start applying the varnish, don't stop in the middle of it and go back and correct some things and things of that nature. Just do one whole area. If you miss a spot, you can put a second coat on and then maybe turn it sideways and go in another direction to put that coat on. So that answers the question of how many coats. Well, you can put as many coats on as you want. We used to experiment with this years ago and put, 8, 9, 10 coats on and have about an eighth inch of polymer resin on top of my works. But you don't need to do that, and it becomes very soft and you can put a fingerprint in it. So I don't suggest you do that, but maybe 2 coats, maybe 3 coats if you need it. Don't ever work into varnish while it's drying. Always let it set and dry and then put another coat over it. That's just a rule of thumb. Air bubbles. Once in a while, little bubbles come up. You can blow on them and pop the bubble, and that works pretty well. You don't want to really let that air bubble dry because it'll leave a little white spot where it dries. But I will tell you, they've worked a lot of those air bubbles out. So how you get air bubbles in your varnish is by shaking your varnish, taking your varnish and maybe doing this to it. Do not ever do that. Now I have to let that sit for at least a day to get all the bubbles out of it. If you want to mix your varnish, you can just stir it like this, gently stir it, okay? Now, varnish comes in 3 sizes. This is the small size. This is all the size you need for your all the projects in this class. It's expensive. Second size, and of course the big size. This is about $35 now for one of these. And I have a whole studio full of that size. I had a little trouble getting the smaller ones, but believe me, this is plenty of varnish. You only use a very small amount for each project that you do. Okay, and now what I recommend is that you actually get the satin varnish. That's a mix between the matte, which is absolutely flat, and the gloss. In between is satin. Now, that was a demand that was made by artists because there was only a matte and a gloss at one time, and Liquitex created satin for the demand. Now they even have this one, which is a high gloss varnish. Today, I'm going to varnish this little shape I made with a gloss varnish. Now, Liquitex recommends that if you're going to put multiple coats on your piece, that you start off with a gloss varnish and then add your other varnishes, whether it be a matte or a high gloss or a satin afterwards. I've have great success with just putting a straight coat of satin on, so I don't think you guys will have a problem. Okay, so the history I want you to know is that problems can happen, so follow these procedures. Clean brush, clean surface. The brush is damp, not wet. Try to get all the moisture out of it. Now, the X stroke. If I go into my varnish, I put my, I don't know if you could see that on the camera, make sure you can. I put my brush in there, and if any air bubbles come out of my brush, I work it to the point where there's no air bubbles, or as few as possible. And then I begin to stroke with an X, like this. And X means that you'll absolutely cover. I come back to the beginning, and I go over it with the X. The X stroke is used a lot in art. That's how blends are made over wide surfaces and things of that nature. So I find that it is actually very nice coverage if you do that. Now, I have just completed the varnish on that. See these? There's a couple little bubbles I don't like. I can just blow on them and get rid of them, and now I can let that dry. This will take about 3 hours, is what they say on the bottle, to let it dry before you can put a second coat on. I've had students do everything over the years. I wait a long time on my work, but the fact of the matter is, I think within about an hour or so you could start. 3 hours is a little long. Depends on the humidity. But know that what this does is when you're working with acrylic with multiple finishes, for instance, you may have a matte black that you're working with, a semi-gloss red, and then you have another color that is in between those, and you're doing an entire painting. The surface becomes kind of mixed mashed with varying degrees of surfaces on it, light hits certain parts, shines off other parts, is matte in other parts. Well, when you put this one gloss or one satin varnish over your whole piece, it unifies all the strokes. It always wants to go as flat as it can, and it'll make your piece a stronger and a much more cohesive work. Now, you can wait till it dries. I don't like to do that. I like to sometimes just I don't know if I even burnished this tape. I'm hoping I did. In this demonstration, I'm kind of tearing up a little bit of my board. Apologize. I'm using a map board here, not the traditional board that you guys use in class, so it's a little flimsy. And I'm taking the tape off the way I tell you not to do that. Remember, try to pull out a 45. I guess I just don't care that much about this piece, so I'm just ripping the tape off. There you go. There's the piece varnished. You can see the varnish edge against your board. And this is a gloss finish that you have on this, okay? So you can play around a little bit with it and enjoy working with it. It'll make your pieces finish off at the end, so you have a really nice presentation on your work. That's why I want to introduce this to you and make sure you do it on all of your projects. You don't have to do it on your exercises unless you really want to do it. Okay? Take care now. Till next time. Bye-bye.